Hello, my name is James Williams. Some of you may know me as Dolby or Pestilence85, depending on if you know me on YouTube or not. Today we're going to start our horror month, where we review VHS tapes as opposed to DVDs, because we would mostly rely on Netflix, but due to the fact that sometimes we can't get the movie we want to review on time, we have VHS tapes and we can get them relatively cheap at our local flea markets. Tonight we're going to be reviewing Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. What the movie is an incoherent mess of melodrama, overacting, and ridiculous storytelling of the original story. The first problem I had with this movie was the actors. Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, and Neo from The Matrix all star in this movie. Keanu Reeves, that's his name. Not one of them has been able to give a good performance in this movie. All of them are overacting except for Keanu Reeves because he's as stiff as a board. Anthony Hopkins gives probably the most over-the-top performance of Van Helsing this side of anything that Hammer Horror could have provided, but at least with Hammer Horror it was good because it's Peter Cushing, and he was a much better Van Helsing than anyone who's ever played that character. Winona Ryder as the love interest of the movie, which is a problem, but I'll get into that later, is just a poor rendition of any movie's love interest. She just doesn't do her part well. I never liked her anyway, so that could be a taste thing right there. And Gary Oldman, oh boy. He probably is the worst Dracula I've ever seen, and I've seen Alucard, okay? There's two Draculas in this movie. The older Dracula and the younger Dracula. The older Dracula is trying to do an over-the-top performance of the Bela Lugosi Dracula, and Gary Oldman is trying to do an over-the-top performance of Christopher Lee's Dracula, and that just doesn't work. And the next problem I have with the movie is its plot. Now, it is an adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is a good story. If you haven't read it yet, I'd highly recommend it to anyone who likes classic horror novels. But the problem is with this is that they changed it. They made Dracula more of a sympathetic character, whereas in the novel, he was a very vicious character. They made him based on the actual real-life Dracula, which is interesting, but I have a problem with that because when they did that, they completely retold the story, and I did a report on him, so I would know a lot about that guy. And they made him the tagline of the movie is "Love never dies." If you can see that, is that shot? And it shouldn't be a love story for one thing. It should just be a horror movie, because that's what Dracula is. It's a horror story. Even though he does lust after this one girl, he still is a vicious monster that wants people dead. In this, they try and make him a bit too sympathetic, and that just doesn't work with Dracula. The pacing, it was an odd balance. It felt like it wanted to be more fast-paced at times, but then sometimes it took its sweet time. And I'm sorry, but that just doesn't work. You either gotta make it a fast-paced horror movie or a completely eerie, slow-paced horror movie. Sometimes you just can't have the best of both worlds. You can try, doesn't mean it's gonna work. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is the visuals. Now, the visuals are good, but it's the same problem I have with Avatar. Just because you have good visuals doesn't mean you're telling a good story. Doesn't mean it's going to get anyone interested. But, people nowadays are really just, as long as you can give them something good to look at, they won't care that they're getting a crap take on a classic story. So, the only reason why I'd have to recommend it is because the visuals are good, and like I said, people want to just see a movie. They don't really want to care about whether or not the story is good or not. But if I had to go by, if you're a legit horror fan and you want a good horror story to keep you interested and entertained and a good adaptation of Dracula, I don't recommend it. The total rating I'm going to give this is a 2 out of 5. The only reason I was getting that is because the visuals are very good, and it is a story of Dracula. If this was anything else, they'd have 1 star minus. But since that's what it is, I have to give it that. Anyways, this is the review of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Not recommended for straight up horror fans, but recommended for people who aren't really into horror and just want to watch a movie that gives them something good to look at. Anyways, that's my review. Hope you all enjoyed it. Have a good evening.